A royal-approved British bank collapsed because of one typo. In 1995, the personal bank of the Queen of England went completely bankrupt. Yet the culprit behind this historic financial disaster wasn't a ruthless Wall Street corporate raider, nor was it a coordinated cyber attack by a foreign superpower. Instead, the ultimate downfall of this legendary institution was triggered by an ordinary, working-class clerk in Singapore who tried to hide a small bookkeeping error. This is the story of how Barings Bank, a financial empire that survived the Napoleonic Wars and funded the purchase of Louisiana, was brought to its knees by a single employee. To understand the gravity of this collapse, we have to look back at what Barings Bank actually was. Founded in 1762, Barings was the oldest merchant bank in England. It wasn't just a business, it was a pillar of the global British Empire. The French statesman Duke of Richelieu famously remarked that there were 6 great powers in Europe: Great Britain, France, Russia, Austria, Prussia, and Barings Bank. It was an elite, conservative institution run by old money aristocrats who made decisions over afternoon tea and valued reputation above all else. For over 2 centuries, their word was gold. Then came Nick Leeson. Born in Watford to a plasterer and a nurse, Leeson was the antithesis of the aristocratic Barings executive. He didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. He was ambitious, sharp, and hungry to prove himself. He joined Barings in London as a back-office clerk, resolving operational discrepancies. In 1992, after successfully sorting out a messy paperwork backlog in Jakarta, the firm rewarded him by sending him to Singapore. At just 25 years old, Leeson was appointed general manager of Barings' new futures trading operation on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, or SIMEX. At first, Leeson was a corporate dream. He was brilliant, charismatic, and possessed an extraordinary work ethic. Because the Singapore branch was brand new, London made a critical, almost unfathomable mistake in corporate governance. They allowed Leeson to head both the front office trading team and the back office settlement team. In the financial world, this is a cardinal sin. It is the equivalent of allowing a student to write an exam, grade it themselves, and then lock the grade book in their own personal desk. This dual role gave Leeson complete, unchecked control over the entire Singapore operation. His primary job was arbitrage trading. He was supposed to buy futures contracts on one exchange and simultaneously sell them on another, locking in tiny, risk-free profits from the price differences. It was supposed to be a safe, boring, and highly predictable business. But the pressure to perform was immense. The trading floor in Singapore was a chaotic, high-stress arena of screaming traders and flashing screens, and Leeson wanted to be the king of it. Then, the fatal mistake occurred. It was July 17, 1992. A newly hired clerk on Leeson's team panicked and accidentally bought 20 contracts instead of selling them. It was a minor clerical error, but it resulted in an immediate loss of £20,000. Under normal corporate procedures, Leeson should have reported this error to London. The bank would have absorbed the minor loss, the clerk would have been reprimanded, and life would have gone on. But Leeson was terrified that his pristine reputation would be tarnished, and that his dream of climbing the corporate ladder would be shattered. Instead of reporting the loss, Leeson decided to hide it. He opened a secret, dormant account in the bank's computer systems. The account number was 88888. In Chinese culture, the number 8 is a symbol of extreme good luck and prosperity. But, for Barings Bank, this account would become a financial black hole. Leeson swept the £20,000 loss into account 88888, hoping to trade his way out of the deficit over the next few days. But, the market didn't cooperate. To cover the initial loss, Leeson began taking massive, unauthorized speculative risks. He wasn't just doing arbitrage anymore, he was actively gambling on the direction of the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei 225. When his bets went wrong, the losses in account 88,888 grew. To hide the mounting debt, he began trading even more aggressively, doubling down on his bets to recover the previous losses. It was the classic trap of the desperate gambler. By the end of 1992, the secret deficit in account 88888 was £2 million. By the end of 1993, that number had swelled to £23 million. Yet on the official books, Leeson was a financial wizard. Because he controlled the back office, he created fake accounts and falsified records to show London that he was making tens of millions of dollars in legitimate profits. The executives in London, blinded by their own greed and completely ignorant of how complex derivatives trading worked, believed every word. They showered Leeson with praise, and in 1994, they awarded him a personal bonus of almost £500,000. He was the undisputed star of the firm. To fund his secret trading, Leeson began writing straddles. This is an incredibly risky options strategy where a trader bets that the market will remain stable and trade within a very narrow price range. If the market stays flat, the trader pockets the premiums from the options. For a while, this dangerous strategy worked perfectly. Leeson collected millions in premiums, which he used to cover the margin calls on his losing futures contracts. He was walking a financial tightrope over an active volcano. Then, the earth literally split open. At 5:46 a.m. on January 17, 1995, a massive 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck the city of Kobe, Japan. The destruction was catastrophic. Over 6,000 people lost their lives, infrastructure was devastated, and the Japanese financial markets went into a state of absolute panic. The Nikkei index plunged violently, shattering the stable price range that Leeson had bet his entire career on. In a single morning, his secret losses skyrocketed by tens of millions of dollars. Leeson was now in an impossible position. He was facing ruin, but, instead of surrendering, he decided to fight the entire global market. He launched a desperate, megalomaniacal campaign to single-handedly prop up the Japanese stock index. He bought thousands of Nikkei futures contracts, trying to force the market back up through sheer buying volume. It was like trying to stop an oncoming freight train with a paper shield. The more contracts he bought, the further the market fell, and the more money he lost. To keep his massive positions open, Leeson needed cash to meet his margin requirements. He repeatedly messaged London, demanding urgent capital injections. He claimed these funds were for risk-free transactions on behalf of wealthy clients. Incredible as it sounds, the senior executives at Barings in London never verified his claims. They simply wired him the money. Over the course of a few weeks, they sent Leeson over $850 million. This represented nearly the entire capital reserves of the 233-year-old bank. London was literally draining its own vaults to fund a rogue clerk's desperate gamble. By February 23, 1995, the game was finally over. The Nikkei index continued its relentless downward slide, and Leeson's secret losses reached an astronomical £827 million. This was more than double the entire capital and reserves of Barings Bank. Leeson knew the auditors were closing in and that detection was inevitable. He sat at his desk, typed a brief note that simply read "I'm sorry," packed his bags, and fled Singapore with his wife. The next morning, the London executives finally looked at the true state of the Singapore books. The shock was absolute. The senior partners convened in emergency sessions, desperately pleading with the Bank of England and other financial institutions for a bailout. But the black hole was too deep. No one was willing to rescue an institution that had exhibited such staggering incompetence. On February 26, 1995, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. The oldest and most prestigious bank in England, a firm that had survived global wars and financial crises for over 2 centuries, was dead. A few days later, the Dutch financial conglomerate ING stepped in. They agreed to acquire all of Barings' assets and, crucially, all of its colossal liabilities. The purchase price for this historic, empire-building institution was exactly £1. Nick Leeson was eventually arrested at an airport in Germany after a week on the run. He was extradited back to Singapore, where he pleaded guilty to charges of deceiving the bank's auditors and cheating the Cimex exchange. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, though he was released early in 1999 after being diagnosed with colon cancer, which he ultimately survived. If this high-stakes collapse opened your eyes, you must watch our video about how a modern logistics giant lost hundreds of millions of dollars in a single day due to a simple software update. Be honest in the comments. If you made a major mistake at work tomorrow, would you confess immediately, or would you try to hide it in your own secret account? Because, as one young trader learned, the longest-running empires can fall in an instant, proving that even a global financial superpower is only ever one mistake away from